Mm. Hi, Colleen.
Hey, good to talk to you
I'm
today.
so excited. I mean, I just always feel like the minute somebody comes onto the Zoom, I should press record because I do feel like some of the most fun stuff happens
When the
when we're
pressure's off.
chatting. I know. And I came in so frazzled because my dog sitter was late and I was like eating a piece of cheese. And you're just so lovely. And I am so excited to talk about, I don't know, what a privilege to get to talk to you as a person who, but honestly, I don't even say that tongue in cheek. And I say a lot of things tongue in cheek, but I have to say, like, you know, Mind Body Green's the OG of the wellness space. So we're really, I mean, to be able to sit and chat with the OG, I feel like it's like Encyclopedia Britannica. For those of you who don't know what that is, before we had the interweb, we had to go into the books. We had all the info there. We had all that info there. What do you think about wellness? Because I deal with a lot of people in eating disorders and addiction, and I think it's can be a really complicated topic,
Oh,
and
100%.
and especially for people who are dealing with real stuff, right? And I think when people think of wellness and total health, they think about eating everything organic, like no processed foods, like all the sleep, all the rest, and then when I know about brain science and the brain shut down, and then we're just like, maybe wellness isn't for me.
Right. I am very conflicted about the word wellness. I think it's been hijacked by a lot of people and it's kind of strayed from its true intentions. It comes off as something that's for people with tons of money and tons of time, all things, most people, including myself, don't have. And it doesn't marry up with kind of my definition of wellness or well-being, which I think, you really need to integrate it into your life. So it's not this other thing out here that's just another thing to buy, another thing to do, another thing you don't have time for, which is ironic, right? Because we're living in this time when we all need tools for health and well-being more than we ever did. We're living in some sort of post-traumatic stress syndrome in varying degrees that we are all carrying scar tissue from the past 2 years in varying amounts. And so we need tools now more than ever, but the tools we have are super divisive and super polarizing. So
can we explain what we mean? I agree, but can we just explain what we mean by divisive and polarizing?
Well, in so many ways, like even if you look at the wellness, and I'm just going to use wellness because I think everyone understands the word when I use it, even if, it may not be my favorite word to describe kind of well-being and wellness. Everyone knows what I mean. But if you look at what's happening in the world right now, the wellness world is like super divided over everything from, big macro things like COVID to even just how you should eat and how you should diet. It's not like there's civilized conversations happening about any of these.
Absolutely. Really I would say there's like bullying if there's anything, right? I get bullied a lot. That's why, truly.
It really just, marries the political divides that we have and our inability to have civilized discourse and all these things. And a lot of the knock on wellness is super justified. There is so much clutter out there. There isn't a lot of, clear information in terms of, what's trustworthy, what's not. A lot of the things that garner a lot of attention probably aren't always rooted in science. And I understand a lot of the pushback, but I also have had my life transformed by health and well-being. I know how good the tools can be when they're used in the right way.
Mm-hmm. How was your life transformed by well-being? Like, how did you get here?
Yeah, so I had a very kind of traditional trajectory after graduating from college. My husband, who I work with and is the co-founder and co-CEO along with me here at Mind Body Green, always jokes that I missed Exxon on my tour of big companies because I had worked at Gap Inc. And then we moved to New York and I worked at Walmart and then I worked at Amazon. And then while I was at Amazon, I had a life-threatening pulmonary embolism.
Wow.
And I had just gotten back from a super short trip to Miami, which I live in New York. So that's a, 2.5 hour flight. I've done a lot of traveling over my lifetime. So this wasn't a novelty. And a couple days after being back, I said to my husband, I noticed like there's a little bit of swelling in my foot. I was like, I just kind of brushed it off. And then it was a Saturday in New York. And I know you're an ex-New Yorker. So I was going to,
I'm also a current New Yorker. I can't say I'm an ex-New York. I'm not there yet.
I get it.
That was really painful. I might move back right now. That was really painful.
Just not right now.
Maybe it's not like in this minute or soon, but okay. Yeah,
exactly. So I had done a 11 a.m. Strala yoga class with my good friend Tara Stiles. And that was like my Saturday church back in the day. And I called my husband and I was like, I'm feeling a little out of breath. Could you come and meet me in the city? We walked around for a little bit. I took the A train back to Brooklyn. And as I was walking up the subway stairs, there's a lot of stairs at that station, I just fell over. And, in typical woman fashion, this can't be that big of a deal. I just downplayed it, called my doctor when we exited the station and kind of did everything I could to downplay what was happening, which so many people do.
And that's a trauma response. Like a trauma response is to say, it's not a big deal. Oh, I'm fine.
Totally. And also, New York ERs are not a place you want to be on a beautiful Saturday. Again, perspective, but these were the thoughts that were going through my brain. So, kind of got out of having to go immediately to the ER and did things that I had never done before. Like I took a nap. I was so effing tired. That is not something I normally do, where my husband's like, what is happening here? And then on Monday, before I went to work, my husband was like, the only way I will let you go to work is if you promise to go to the doctor on the way to the office. So I get to the, my GP, and he's like, does the initial test and is like, I'm pretty sure you have a pulmonary embolism. It was back in the 2012. So, I think I got in a taxi and I was like, what's a pulmonary embolism? Like, I've heard of this thing. I was so disoriented. He literally wrote it on a piece of paper for me. I think because he was like, I was so frazzled. Like I knew it sounded really bad, but I didn't know how to articulate it. So he gave me this piece of paper so I could walk in and be like, I have a pulmonary embolism. I get to the ER and they're like, we've never seen someone with so many clots in their lungs. Oh my God. And I'm still just confused. I'm a yoga going, what I thought at the time was healthy-ish lifestyle and probably more on the fitness side than, all sides of it at that time in retrospect. But, with a PE, there's not much they can do. You get on medication that eventually clears the clots, but you don't leave the hospital and you're like, great, I feel great. Mm-hmm. You leave the hospital and that you're taking medication to help clear the clots. And it was a really, really long road to feel better. And I think so many people in wellness hit those rock bottom, I need to effing change my life moments. You're not like, I'm feeling okay. Maybe I should do a total 180 and just flip everything on its head.
Yeah, no. Of course. I always say that about spirituality. Like no one ever chooses to be spiritual. They're usually like, I need a whole new way of thinking. Who's got something for me,
Totally. And I had been going through a lot of kind of questions around my purpose and wasn't very fulfilled at all in the work I was doing. And this was definitely the cosmic kick in the butt from the universe to help, just unsettle all this dust and put me on, an exploratory path where I literally it was like a game of Marco Polo for me I was trying everything to see what it would do in terms of would it help me feel better. And when I would get a little bit closer to something that made me feel good, I'd dive a little bit more into it. Wow. And that journey lasted a long, long time. It's probably still in process because wellness is a journey.
Yeah.
But it took a big 6 months before I started being able to breathe normally and, not just take those things for granted. And at the time, my husband had been, working on Mind Body Green his full time. And for me, it was nights and weekends. And that was the big cosmic kick from the universe of like, okay, we need to really start aligning my purpose with my passions and thinking about my life under a little bit more rigor.
I love that. But you guys had already started the website at that point. And what, like, so you just quit everything and put it all in there?
No. And you know, my advice to entrepreneurs is always like super unsexy.
I love unsexy. Everything I say is unsexy. I'm so here for that.
It's never what
I'm like, trust yourself. I'm like, it's a journey. Everyone's like, can you stop? Can you just tell me where the cleanse is, Molly? You know, oh, I'm so with you. Tell me all the unsexy things. I'm here for it.
I mean, all the unsexy things was, you know, Mind Body Green started out of our apartment, which was 600 square feet. And we didn't start monetizing, i.e. bringing in any sort of money from the business for a good 3 or 4 years. So while I was very, very, you know, kind of conflicted about my corporate roles, it would have been detrimental to our marriage if we did not have a paycheck and our ability to pay rent and clearly health insurance, which I clearly needed for a catastrophic event. So, you know, when I look back at this time, I'm like, oh shit, I wish you could have been more patient with yourself. Because I do think there's this pressure to have, you know, purpose and everything like line up, you know, as soon as you're ready. And I learned a lot in those jobs. Did it, you know, speak to my soul? No.
I love that though. Cause I think the other problem that happens with this wellness, this all or nothing wellness is that it brings out, you know, just that I think this perfectionism trend, which, you know, I think, and I'll say it, like, I think can really easily turn into an eating disorder, like an orthorexic, hypersensitive, should I do this? Should I do this? And I think like, so I just wonder about that too, where it's like, how do we navigate this world? Example would be, I just finished hosting a Quit Sugar Summit and there's just all these experts on it. And I say to people, anybody who I even walk across the street, I'm like, listen with your wisdom. Like, cause if you're going to leave that sugar summit, you're going to be like, I don't know what to do. I can't do anything. I have to do everything. I have to be keto. I have to be a vegan. I have to be a vegan. You know, it's like, and I guess I'm very curious about how we find this fine line between wellness and compulsivity, wellness and orthorexia, wellness and obsessing.
Yeah.
Because also, aren't we supposed to get well to like be helpful to others and live our best lives? I think.
Right.
Personally.
Right. And to live a complete and fulfilling life, which is probably not involving obsessing about your wellness. And, you know, some of the biggest North Stars for me are not wellness people. It's a lot of blue zones. And, you know, if you're not familiar, blue zone, Dan Buettner has written some phenomenal books and studied the habits of people who are centenarians and live longer than anyone on earth. You know, shocking. They don't have Pelotons. They don't go to the gym, but they're people who really integrate what we would call wellness into their lives in terms of they walk a lot. They have built-in communities. It's communities where there's generational living happening. And there's grandparents who are living with granddaughters, which not only helps the parents, but provides a purpose for the grandparents. When they eat, it's communal. It's a ritual. It's a celebration. And I think that fine line of, when wellness takes over your thoughts and your obsession is real. And I think we have to watch out for it. I think the goal should really be integration and refocusing on this idea of living a complete and fulfilling life. Over the past 12 years, I have so much descaled back my wellness routine where I think
Me too, would probably, by the way. Yeah.
People probably think I'm making complicated potions in the morning before I go to work, but it's really having your wellness work for you and finding out, okay, what are these kind of like non-negotiables where the science is very clear, there's probably ancient practices that are also saying the same thing. That's always a good bet when, lots of different
practice. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like
if they haven't changed it for 2,000 years,
it's breath. Probably something we should lean into.
Yep. Just sitting quietly. It doesn't pay much money, doesn't get a lot of clicks, but there we are.
Totally. And there's an element of intentionality that we have to have about living a well life. And, there's always this spectrum of, intuitive to intentionality. And I know that in my 20s, left to my intuition, I would be eating a lot of sugar, a lot of like sugar laden lattes.
Yeah. And lychee martinis. Yeah. Lychee martinis.
Probably not. You have to calibrate and get to a baseline. And then I think it's really about understanding, okay, what are these things that everyone, probably 80% of us need to be doing, unless you're dealing with something that's, complex or unusual, or there's something about your biochemistry that's complex or unusual. And then how do you find the things that really complement your life so that you can easily integrate into your life? But most people, I feel like after they go on this journey, do you find they're taking the complexity out of their wellness routines?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I just do think this whole part of people giving their power away so easily to any human being like, I have the answer. And someone's like, okay, well, just take my whole soul. And then they have 15 teachers. They have no sense of self. I mean, I think part of breath and meditation is really tapping into your inner wisdom. Eventually, it's obviously one of the many benefits of it. And I guess that's the part I worry about. If you were to say to somebody, I know like Mind Body Green obviously serves so many people in their wellness, but how would you have people like, you're so smart about this. I'm so happy to talk to you. Like, how do you encourage people to navigate these trends? Right. I have one of my mentors, he's a food addiction guy. He's been in it for 1,000 years, Marty Lerner. And he's just like, stay alive long enough. The trend will always come back. That's what he's saying about like the keto. He's like, stay alive long enough. Atkins, keto, it'll all come back. Right. And even in a way, like even the Mediterranean diet, even though it's like an old steady, it comes in and out of fame, right? It's a steady, the research is incredible on it. So if you could drop us some like wisdom on what to do with all of this overload, what would you say?
Yeah, there's so much clutter out there. And I think the pillars from which we started Mind Body Green in 2009, we have a poster of them that's still in our office, and they still all ring true to me. And, it's this mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and environmental well-being. Mind Body Green, it's one word because it's all connected. Mm-hmm. And I do think you need to tend to all of those pillars in your life. And you can, go through them, each of them, and think through, what does that mean to me? And how do I need to tend to myself? I can speak to a lot of these for me. I could take the physical pillar. I do not need to be doing any cardio, full stop. And I think the science is moving there in terms of recovery, where you're starting to hear more about this, but it's really about finding what's right for you at where you are in your life. And the part that I think is tricky about this is you really do have to be the CEO of your own healthcare.
Well, there's your quotable. You really do.
and
you can't you can hire out people, but you can't hire a CEO of yourself.
Totally. This is not something you can outsource. And I've been to some of, the best doctors through connections and had some of the best experiences and had some of the worst experiences. Yeah. I could say that about healers too, especially when I was on my PE journey. I also had a huge fertility journey. It's another state where you're so desperate.
So vulnerable.
You will do anything.
Right.
And I've had some of the best doctors, some of the worst doctors, some of the best healers, and some of the worst healers. And you have to tap into, that intuition that's telling you, this doesn't feel right. This isn't right. Even when there's that, I can't put my finger on it, to help guide you to what's making you feel better. And then across all these pillars, when you start, trying things and experimenting, you do start to getting a sense of, oh yeah, I feel better after that. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. We should do that. We should do more of that. We should start thinking about that more. If you leave, a cardio class and you're just exhausted to the point that you can't stay awake at work, that's probably not what your body needs. And so there's a lot of listening that has to be learned, because I don't think I had these skills in a lot of my life.
I'm with you. And I have to say, tragically, like you, the only way I learned to prioritize these skills was through desperation, right? I wasn't like, oh, my life's so great, let me work on my spiritual path. Let me see what I physically need. I was like, oh, I'm throwing up and almost getting fired. Like, let me look at my eating disorder. I guess it's just always when I have these conversations, I'm like, gosh, I so appreciate what we said in the beginning, which is, wellness really starts to become something that's for rich people and people with a lot of time. And I guess when we're sitting here, I mean, transparently, you're like spiritual, mental. I was like, that's too many things, Colleen. I can't, it's the first thing I was like, I can't, I just wanted to shut down. Even when you said cause you said 7 pillars, and I was like, that's too many pillars. So what do we do
for you too?
Well, I mean, can you simplify it in a way that like if I have 3 kids, this is sort of, I think, what the problem, and I'm telling you something, I'm so concerned that we're not shifting after COVID. I'm just so concerned about it, because I feel like if there was ever a time for us to say, I need to reevaluate this existence, it's after you've been through a global pandemic. And I mean, personally, it's like my own personal assessment. Everyone's just like business as usual. I've completely redone my home. That's why I live in North Carolina. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I guess I'm just wondering, because I know a lot of my listeners, they're in my Facebook group. I know a lot of them, people communicate with me, and I want to make sure we attend to them. They're like, okay, I have 2 jobs, 4 kids. I can't get off of sugar. I'm struggling with this eating disorder. I have no, what do we say? How can we simplify this for them?
Yeah. And I think it's a process of understanding what's going to have the biggest impact and focus on that first.
I am here for that, Colleen.
We were talking a little bit before the Zoom recorded about sleep. For me, that is the number one thing that controls every other factor of my life. And my kids are 2.5 and 5. And yes, that is to show that, even if I can get my sleep etiquette in control, there are forces beyond my control that can interrupt my sleep. But that for me will make the single biggest impact. I will skip any workout to get an extra hour of sleep, because I know that my body is still in 5 years of catch-up mode. And I think it's, it is individual to the person about finding, what is it for them that's going to move the needle the most, and lean into that first before we just focus on everything.
I'm in love with this. Because if we can, this is our first, get your pen out. This is the first actionable piece, right? Which is take the thing that you think is going to make the most impact and do that, right? So yours is sleep. Mine is sleep. Maybe someone else's is food, I would think. But I actually think it's not just what Colleen thinks, by the way. Colleen's super well researched. So am I. I actually think the research is moving so profoundly towards sleep being kind of above everything else. Is that what you're seeing?
I love the focus on sleep fitness, as they're calling it these days.
Ooh, tell me more.
I love that it elevates it to the point that you think about your physical fitness, but are you thinking in the same ways about your sleep fitness? Probably not.
Yeah. And I think we want to define fitness, because I think sleep fitness, I'm going to a sleep class because I have a little exercise bulimia in my history. But what we're saying is the adequacy of your sleep. Is that what we mean by it?
Exactly. And you have to set yourself up for sleep, going to bed at whatever time works for you. And there's a whole conversation to be had about different sleep chronotypes and what time you should be going to bed, which is, based on your own makeup. But I have to start thinking about sleep, because this is the single biggest factor on my well-being when I wake up in the morning. And I start thinking about light exposure. I always laugh when I see people say, oh yeah, stop your caffeine intake at 3 o'clock. I need to stop my caffeine intake around 10:30 a.m.
I literally just moved mine to 10 a.m. Every year I get older, it used to be 4. This morning, I just because I have started to not have great sleep again. And I was like, well, first you start with the caffeine.
Totally. And then, being super intentional about my light exposure at night.
Tell us more about that. I don't know enough about my light exposure. Tell me more about this.
So light exposure for me was transformative in helping my body fall asleep. A lot of people can fall into 2 buckets: falling asleep, staying asleep. I was a lucky person who had problems with both of them. So I had to do, a full court press. And, as I think, like, I kind of think in terms of throughout the day, being intentional about caffeine intake. As you go through the rest of the day, being intentional about the type of workout. I found that if I did a cardio workout, it would actually spike my energy levels in a way that wasn't beneficial to sleep. So I changed that. I did learn through my Oura Ring that alcohol and sleep for me was not a good combination. It is for many, many people because of its impact on heart rate variability, but somehow I needed a tracker to tell me the obvious. And I don't sleep with a tracker anymore because I don't like being reminded of, my poor sleep days.
Yeah. And I think it's so funny, trackers, right? Like I have such tracker neutrality because I think for some people they're amazing. And then for some people, totally, they're hyper obsessive. And anybody listening, an Oura tracker is a ring that you wear at night that tracks a lot of things about you, right? Sleep. What else does it track? Exercise,
heart rate variability. It also does your steps, and they just upgraded it to have a lot of women's health factors as well. But I've stopped wearing it because I didn't find it helpful to me on my sleep journey to be reminded of those inevitable bad sleep days, which are just part of the process. It's going to happen.
I'm in love with that though, because I think if anybody's listening, like this is sort of like the OG of like wellness, being like, we have to become not just CEOs of our health, but I think scientists of our health, which is to say that perhaps we need a new hypothesis every now and then. Perhaps there's a different way to do things. And I think we get so stuck in, well, Colleen told me that I should wear an Oura ring. And it's like, no, Colleen just said I wore an Oura ring and then an Oura ring stopped working for me. So now I don't wear an Oura ring. And I would imagine maybe you'll start wearing an Oura ring again, right? Like, but people get so rigid. Like it's like a journey. It's like, yeah. And I think people can get a polarized relationship with an Oura ring,
Totally. And there's counterpoints. My husband sleeps with, 3 trackers on and they don't affect him and he loves it. God bless. To each your own. And around nighttime, that's when the light exposure, it's so critical. And this is a place where I will intentionally break the rules because I find joy in it.
Yes. I break the rules because I find joy in it. Can everybody listen to this? Yes.
We will watch TV in our bed. So we technically broke 2 rules there.
You sure did. I do that one a lot and I feel great about it.
I feel great about it. TV brings us a lot of joy. And especially I find that I need to really disconnect. And that happens to be through fiction. So whether it's reading my Kindle, watching TV, how I will do it in a way that's better for my sleep is I'll put on BlueBlox glasses. They have red frames on them to help minimize the light exposure so that I'm not sending mixed signals to my body about when it's time to wind down. We're pretty diligent about temperature. That had a huge impact on my ability to fall asleep as well. So even on a day like today, when it's 25 degrees in New York, we'll go to sleep with the room at 65 to 67.
Is that what the data says? The colder room
That's
works?
What the data says.
I'm learning so much today and I may or may not take it on. So what you're saying is the amount of light that you see before you go to bed at night really, really counts. And if you're going to be seeing light at night, you want to be wearing super blocking glasses. You guys must be the king and queen of sexy in bed, like with your beautiful.
Totally.
I think you should post a picture of it. I want to. Can we put it as your podcast picture? You with your
done
handsome glasses on, and then the other thing is temperature.
Temperature 65 to 67, and then I do take Mind Body Green Sleep Support Plus formula.
So do I, which I'm obsessed with.
I'm obsessed with it too. This was the product that I was very, very vocal about being part of the process and guinea pigging it and having such a strong point of view.
What made you decide to come out with products like this? I mean, I'm involved. I mean, I love a lot of your product, honestly. But what made you decide to do that? There's just given the market has a lot of it. I would imagine you had a really good reason why.
I mean, it all goes back to these life-changing personal experiences. And my husband, Jason, and I have both had our own life-changing, experiences where we had health diagnoses, and through smart supplementation, we're able to turn them around. Wow. And we get the question so often years ago, well, what supplements would you recommend? And we're like, there's some great ones out there. There's some not great ones out there. And we wanted to build a suite of products where we felt so great about all of the standards of care that went into all of them. And when I went through a period of time when I was just feeling kind of crappy, and one of those, can't really put a finger on it. There wasn't a, catastrophic PE involved or pulmonary embolism, but just that, unease. One of the things that came back at me was a lot of my markers were really off. Vitamin C was like near scurvy levels. And I'm someone who eats really well most of the time and enjoys myself on the weekends. So I'll put that caveat in there.
Makes me happy.
And there's so much you can do. And then sometimes you really need to be smart about supplementation. And we wanted to set new standards and create the products that we would consume, that our daughters would consume. And it's been a really exciting, 2-year now journey on that front.
Yeah. I take the multivitamin too. Secrets out. And well, the other thing I have to say for me, I have a really hard time with reflux when I take pills, and I never have them with these pills. They just go down with ease, and I don't have to ever feel them again. And that's a treat. So thanks for that. Cause I try a lot of different things and I just get my stomach doesn't take things well. It really takes this stuff well.
Good.
Yeah. So that's amazing. So let me ask you one more question while we're here, while I have your expertise sitting with me. At Mind Body Green and on your podcast, I think it's a really hard thing to be navigating physical health, emotional health, and spiritual health. If you had to emphasize one, I mean, you can answer. I have 2 more questions. This is my first one. What would you emphasize above all?
For me personally, I have had to lean really hard into different ones of those pillars at different points in time. So I hate to give you a very variable answer, but that's been, my own experience when we were struggling to conceive our first daughter for so long. It was a spiritual pillar that was keeping me alive. And,
how do you define spiritual pillar? Oh my God, I bet, by the way, but how would you define spiritual pillar there? That's a beautiful thing to say.
Believing in a universe having a plan for you, believing and trusting the process, believing that you might not be able to connect the dots right now. And I think I very, type A rigidly was like, here's the timeline that this is happening and here's how it's going to happen. And you really just have to surrender and come to terms with the fact that this is something that you and your army of conventional doctors with the best, degrees or whatever it may be, might not be able to solve. And I think until I came to peace with that, I would not have been able to continue on the journey and probably wouldn't have been able to have, the children that we have today. So I think it really depends on where you're at. And, ideally you're able to incorporate a blend of each of them. And, there's obviously been times in my life, like when I had my PE, when I leaned super hard into conventional medicine. And, I remember my husband calling our friend and, Dr. Frank Lipman, and he was like, oh no, you don't want to F with this. Just lean into everything they're offering you at the hospital. and having the wisdom to understand what you need a little bit more of, and being able to give yourself a little perspective to understand what you need in life.
Yeah, I love that. I think what you're saying is so impeccable and so important, which is because we are, complicated and complex beings, it's always going to depend what you're prioritizing. And that perhaps it's also true to say we can't really prioritize everything all the time. I mean, I imagine as like a mother, a pretty serious business owner, a friend, like I imagine, how do you do that? Like, how do you do that? And like, be happy.
Yeah. I struggle with my own well-being. And I think it's one of the dirty little secrets of so many wellness entrepreneurs where, the realities of running a business don't change. Even if it's something you're passionate about and something that aligns with your purpose, you still have to deal with the same hard conversations and hard decisions. And for me, what I've noticed about myself is that I have this tendency not to prioritize myself. And I always have to remind myself, treat yourself like you treated yourself when you were pregnant. Because when I was pregnant, I had no problem, scheduling that prenatal massage, doing my acupuncture. And then you have kids and jobs and priorities and friends and community. And I find that I have to remind myself to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And the best way for me to ensure I do it is, to calendarize it, to make sure it's happened, to make a weekly habit of it, because no one is going to tell you, hey, should you get another session by yourself or whatever that means to you. And I think for the past 20 months, I've realized for me, childcare can be the most self-care that I can give myself. It's not always about, these elaborate treatments. It's maybe about just having 2 hours to yourself. And that is revitalizing and so, so important.
The other thing I've been noticing about my self-care is this thing I've started to do, and it's really filed under people pleasing, where I'll just cut my limits quite. Oh, I can just attend to that email, even though it's past the time that I attend to emails. Oh, you know what? I can just go quickly talk to this. I can go quickly on that podcast, even though I'm at my, and I always say about me, like when I say it's no big deal, 1,000% it's a big deal. Like that is my call to, that's my emergency code when I say it's not a big deal. Because I think if I see all these little teeny slits I'm making on my own boundaries, right? It's a big boundary. It's a big boundary cross. And I just gave that counsel to a friend of mine. I'm like, I think we all need to just start to look at really where we're putting our energy. Cause I bet you I could get 3 hours a week off of how many little, oh, it's okay. Okay. I can just talk to you. Oh yeah, I can just do that. Oh yeah, I can. Like, it's a really interesting thing about being a little bit more, because I think for anybody listening saying, and there's like 10,000 memes on this, right? I don't have the time, Molly. It's like, then stop scrolling. Take the 15 minutes that you're scrolling and go breathe or go have a walk with a friend, Well,
the points that you're bringing up that I think are so important is that self-care probably doesn't look like what you're seeing on Instagram. Yeah. I wish I did rose petal baths on a more frequent basis. And then also, it can take the form of boundaries. It can take the form of therapy, and it's probably another word that's been hijacked by the internet.
So it's like narcissist. I mean, I could talk to you all day. We have so many things. People say like narcissist, like this terrible word. I'm like, I think I'm going to need to look at the definition for a minute. That's my therapist hat coming on. Like, they're a narcissist. I'm like, that's like a very complex thing to say about somebody. Anyway, another conversation for another time. Let me ask you a question. I love what you're saying about the septuagenarians, because I love how they have community, because I think community is everything. The opposite of addiction is connection. I would be lost without mine. But when you think about the name of my podcast, What You're Craving, it's really trying to get to the root of why we're doing all these things to ourselves. Like, so what do you think we're really craving in all of this?
A great question. I think over the years, we've asked ourselves that very question about all of the wellness things we're doing, and asked ourselves, what is the point of all this wellness? And living a complete and fulfilling life as you define it. And what that means to me could be very different than what it means to you, could be very different, to someone in your audience. For me, it's living with purpose. It's having time to cultivate relationships with my family and my friends, having time to enjoy my work, but also enjoy my time outside of work, which, has taken as an entrepreneur a lot of time for me to get comfortable with, because I think I've harbored some guilt if I'm not working on my business each and every hour. So that's taken a lot of unlearning. But I think the most important thing is you have to define and get an idea and an image of what you want that life to look like. And there's lots of wellnessy ways to do it, whether it's vision boards or other ways, but whatever way resonates. But you have to kind of understand and get a sense of where you're trying to go before you just do all the things.
Oh, I love that. And before you do all the things just because it worked for somebody else. I mean, the thing I have to say, I've said it, I think also an understanding that these things change over time, right?
Yeah.
Because we're evolving awake people, what you're craving today or what's underneath might be different tomorrow. And I think I just give everybody the permission to change, you can change your mind at any time. I love that part. One day you're wearing an Oura ring. The next day you're like, it's too obsessive. I'm done with this. Thank you. I love that. It's the best story I ever heard on wellness. That's probably like the healthiest thing you ever did. Can you imagine? You were like, I don't know. I slept badly. I'm such a bad. What do you need that for? Ugh. Adore you. Thank you so much for my sleep. It really helps. Those sweet little pills are so helpful to me. We don't call them pills. We call them supplements. I sound like you're my dealer. You're not my dealer, but your supplements are amazing and I love them. And I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I truly enjoyed our time together.
Me too. Yeah.